A young woman crashed her car on a quiet road in New Hampshire. Just a few minutes later, she was gone. No one knows exactly what happened to her. There were witnesses, there was a timeline, there was a search, but more than 20 years later, there is still no confirmed answer. This is the story of Maura Murray. Maura was 21 years old in February of 2004. She was a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. By most accounts, she was smart, athletic, and driven. She had grown up in Massachusetts and was very close to her family. Her father, Fred Murray, often spoke about how proud he was of her. She had competed in sports and had earned a place at a military academy before eventually transferring to study nursing. From the outside, Maura's life seemed fairly normal. She was attending college, working, spending time with friends, and planning for the future. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, several events happened that investigators and followers of the case have examined closely ever since. Quick pause before we continue. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, let me know your country in the comments. I love seeing where these cases reach. And if you're interested in real criminal cases, unsolved mysteries, and in-depth investigations, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss future documentaries. A few days before she vanished, Maura attended a family gathering. Her father had traveled to Amherst and spent time with her. During that visit, they reportedly looked at cars because Maura was interested in getting a newer vehicle. That Saturday night, Maura borrowed her father's Toyota Corolla. Later that evening, she crashed it into a guardrail. Police responded, but no one was seriously injured. The accident was documented, and Maura returned to campus afterward. At first, it seemed like a simple accident, but because it happened only 2 days before she disappeared, people later wondered whether it had affected her state of mind. Then came another event. On Thursday, February 5th, Maura was working a security job on campus. During her shift, she reportedly became upset. According to a supervisor, she received a phone call and afterward appeared emotional and unresponsive. When someone asked what was wrong, she reportedly said something along the lines of, "My sister." Exactly what caused her reaction remains unclear. Family members later suggested that Maura may have been upset about personal issues involving her older sister. Others believe the situation may have been more complicated. Whatever happened that night, it stood out enough that people remembered it later. The following Monday, February 9th, Maura took several actions that would become extremely important once she disappeared. Earlier that day, she emailed her professors. She told them there had been a death in her family and that she would be away for about a week. Investigators later determined that there had not actually been a death in the family. She also contacted her employer and said she would not be coming in. Then she searched for directions to locations in northern New Hampshire and Vermont. She looked at lodging options and travel information. At some point, she packed some belongings from her dorm room. What exactly she was planning remains one of the biggest questions in the entire case. Some people believe she simply wanted a short break from school. Others think she was dealing with stress and wanted time alone. There is no clear evidence showing exactly why she left campus that day. At around 4:30 in the afternoon, Maura withdrew most of the money from her bank account. The amount was just under $300. Surveillance footage from the ATM captured her making the transaction. She also purchased alcohol from a nearby liquor store. The receipt showed a variety of items, including wine and other alcoholic beverages. Later that day, she left Amherst, driving her black Saturn sedan. At some point during the drive, she headed north. The route would eventually take her toward New Hampshire. For hours, no one knew anything was wrong. Then, shortly after 7 p.m., events began moving very quickly. On Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, residents living near a sharp curve heard or noticed a vehicle accident. The area was rural. Houses were spread apart. The roads were dark. It was winter, and temperatures were cold. One local resident, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood, was returning home when he came across a crashed vehicle. The car had gone off the road and struck a snowbank. Atwood stopped to check on the driver. According to his account, he spoke with a young woman who appeared to be alone. He later identified that woman as Maura Murray. During the conversation, Atwood asked whether she needed help. He said Maura told him she had already called roadside assistance. That statement immediately raised questions later, because cell phone service in the area was unreliable, and investigators found no evidence that she had successfully contacted roadside assistance. Atwood reportedly offered to call police. According to his account, Maura declined. He later said she did not appear injured, although she seemed cold and shaken. After speaking with her briefly, Atwood drove the short distance to his house. Once inside, he called emergency services. This moment would become one of the most discussed points in the entire case. The timeline was incredibly tight. From the time Atwood left the scene until police arrived, only a matter of minutes passed. Yet when officers reached the crash site, Maura was gone. Officer Cecil Smith responded to the scene. When he arrived, he found the Saturn abandoned. No driver, no passenger, no sign of anyone walking nearby. The vehicle showed damage consistent with the crash. Inside the car, investigators found several personal belongings. Some of Maura's items remained inside. There were alcoholic beverages. There were school materials. There were personal effects. But Maura herself was nowhere to be found. Police began looking around the immediate area. The circumstances were unusual. If Maura had simply walked away from the vehicle, where had she gone? And how had she disappeared so quickly? The area around the crash site was covered in snow. Investigators later examined the roadside carefully. One detail would become especially important. There did not appear to be a clear trail of footprints leading away from the road. If Maura had entered the woods immediately after the crash, many people expected there would be visible tracks in the snow. The lack of obvious footprints led investigators to consider another possibility. Could she have gotten into another vehicle? Could someone have driven through the area during those few critical minutes and picked her up? Or was there another explanation entirely? As police continued processing the scene, concern grew. The driver had vanished in a remarkably short period of time. And with every passing hour, the chances of finding immediate answers began slipping away. The next morning, search efforts intensified. Officers, volunteers, tracking dogs, and search teams began focusing on the area surrounding the crash site. At first, many people believed Maura would be found nearby. After all, it seemed possible she had simply become disoriented after the accident and wandered away into the cold New Hampshire night. But as the searches expanded, the case became even more confusing. Search teams covered the area around the crash site. They checked roads, fields, wooded areas, and places where someone might have sought shelter from the cold. The weather conditions worried investigators. It was February in New Hampshire, and nighttime temperatures were low enough to create a real risk of hypothermia. A tracking dog was brought in to help. Investigators used a scent article that belonged to Maura. The dog followed a trail from the crash site for a short distance along the road. Then the scent appeared to stop abruptly. That detail caught people's attention. To some investigators, it suggested that Maura may have traveled along the roadway for a short time and then entered a vehicle. Others cautioned that scent tracking is not perfect and can be affected by weather, time, traffic, and other environmental factors. Still, the result became one of the most discussed pieces of information in the case. As the days passed, search teams found no confirmed sign of Maura. No clothing, no backpack, no personal belongings. No indication of where she had gone after leaving the crash scene. Meanwhile, investigators began trying to understand what had happened before she left Amherst. They looked at her phone records, emails, school activities, and recent interactions with family and friends. The more they learned, the more complicated the picture became. One thing investigators confirmed was that Maura had been dealing with several stressful situations in the weeks before she disappeared. In late 2003, she had been involved in an incident at the University of Massachusetts involving the unauthorized use of a credit card number. The matter had not yet been fully resolved. Then there was the crash involving her father's car just 2 days before she vanished. There were also questions about her personal relationships, school pressures, and future plans. None of these issues necessarily pointed to a disappearance. College students often deal with stress, mistakes, and uncertainty, but investigators wanted to know whether any of these factors could explain why Maura suddenly left campus. As attention focused on her final days, People began examining her actions on February 9th in greater detail. Why had she emailed professors claiming there had been a death in the family? Why had she packed belongings? Why had she withdrawn nearly all the money from her bank account? Why had she searched for accommodations in northern New England? The answers were not obvious. Some people believed she had planned a temporary getaway. The White Mountains region of New Hampshire was familiar to her family. She had spent time there before and knew the area. Under this theory, Maura may have simply wanted a few days away from school and personal stress. The problem was that even if that was her plan, it did not explain what happened after the crash. The accident seemed to be the point where everything changed. Investigators also looked closely at witness accounts from that evening. Several people had observed activity around the crash site. Some reports were considered more reliable than others. As often happens in missing person cases, memories varied, timelines differed slightly, and certain details became harder to verify as time passed. One witness reported seeing a person near the vehicle. Another recalled noticing activity that seemed unusual. Years later, these accounts would continue to be debated by investigators, journalists, and members of the public. One reason the case attracted so much attention was that the timeline was both short and crowded. There were multiple people in the area. Emergency services were contacted. Police arrived quickly. Yet somehow the driver disappeared before anyone could account for where she went. As months passed without answers, different theories started to emerge. One theory was that Maura intentionally left the scene to avoid contact with police. Supporters of this idea point out that she had recently been involved in another car accident. Alcohol was found inside the vehicle. If she had been worried about getting into trouble, she might have decided to leave before officers arrived. Under this scenario, she may have walked away from the crash and later encountered some kind of danger. Another theory suggests she accepted a ride from a passing motorist. If that happened, investigators would have had very little information to work with. Route 112 was not heavily traveled, but vehicles did pass through the area. Someone could have offered assistance. Someone could have appeared trustworthy. Or someone could have had harmful intentions. There has never been confirmed evidence identifying such a driver. Another possibility is that Maura entered the woods and succumbed to the elements. The terrain around the crash site includes wooded areas, hills, and difficult ground. Some people believe she may have moved farther than searchers expected. Supporters of this theory note that search operations, even extensive ones, do not always locate every missing person. At the same time, others argue that repeated searches over many years should have uncovered some evidence if she remained in the area. Because no confirmed trace of Maura has ever been found, none of these explanations can be proven. The lack of physical evidence has allowed multiple possibilities to remain open. As the investigation continued, Maura's family became deeply involved in the search for answers. Her father, Fred Murray, refused to let the case fade from public attention. He spoke to reporters, participated in searches, and pushed for continued investigation. Year after year, he returned to New Hampshire looking for clues. Family members often expressed frustration with the slow pace of progress and the absence of clear answers. At times, disagreements emerged between investigators, family members, independent researchers, and online communities. The case had become one of the most discussed missing person investigations in the United States. As internet forums grew in popularity during the mid-2000s, thousands of people began studying every detail. Maps were analyzed. Witness statements were reviewed. Timelines were reconstructed repeatedly. Photographs, police records, and interviews were examined by people who had never met Maura, but became determined to understand what happened to her. This level of attention created both benefits and challenges. On one hand, public interest kept the case alive. New information continued to surface. Potential witnesses occasionally came forward. On the other hand, the enormous amount of discussion sometimes led to rumors, misunderstandings, and conflicting interpretations. Over time, some theories became far more elaborate than the available evidence supported. Investigators generally remained focused on the facts that could actually be verified, and the verified facts remained surprisingly limited. A 21-year-old woman left Amherst on February 9, 2004. She drove north toward New Hampshire. Her vehicle crashed on Route 112. A witness spoke with her after the accident. Emergency services were called. Police arrived within minutes. Maura Murray was gone. Everything after that remains uncertain. Years later, additional searches were conducted in areas connected to the investigation. Properties were examined. Tips were followed. Ground searches were organized. Specialized equipment was used in some efforts. Each new search generated hope that some long-missing piece of evidence might finally be discovered. But again and again, investigators reached the same point. No confirmed trace of Maura. No confirmed suspect. No confirmed explanation. One particularly difficult aspect of the case is that several theories can fit portions of the evidence. If she left voluntarily, why has there been no verified contact? If she encountered foul play, where is the evidence? If she became lost in the wilderness, why has nothing been found, despite years of searching? Each possibility answers some questions while creating others. And because the critical events occurred within such a short window of time, the missing pieces may never be fully recovered. As the years turned into decades, the case took on a life of its own. For some people, it became a mystery to solve. For others, it remained what it had always been, a missing young woman whose family never stopped looking. And perhaps the most unsettling part is how ordinary the beginning seemed. A college student leaves campus. A drive through New England. A car accident on a winter evening. Nothing about those events suggests one of the most enduring disappearance cases in modern American history. Yet somewhere between the crash and the arrival of police, something happened. And whatever happened during those few minutes changed everything. To understand why the disappearance of Maura Murray continues to generate so much discussion, you have to look closely at those few minutes after the crash. Almost every major theory starts there. The problem is that nobody can say with complete certainty exactly what Maura did after her conversation with Butch Atwood. What we know is fairly simple. Atwood stopped and spoke with her. He offered help. She declined. He drove home and called 911. A short time later, police arrived. By then, she was gone. Everything else comes from witness observations, physical evidence, investigative findings, and attempts to fill in the gaps. One question that comes up often is whether Maura was actually planning to disappear. Some people point to her actions earlier that day. She emailed professors saying there had been a death in the family. She packed belongings. She withdrew most of the money from her bank account. She searched for places to stay in northern New England. To some observers, these actions suggest planning. But there are problems with that theory. If Maura intended to disappear permanently, she left behind many important things. She did not withdraw a large amount of money. She did not empty her accounts. She did not take everything she owned. There is also no confirmed evidence that she established a new identity or successfully started a new life elsewhere. Over the years, there have been occasional claims that someone spotted Maura in another state or another country. None of those reports have ever been verified. Investigators have never publicly announced evidence that she survived and intentionally remained hidden. Another theory focuses on the possibility that she accepted a ride from someone after the crash. This theory became popular partly because of the tracking dog results. As investigators described it, the scent trail appeared to continue a short distance along the road before ending. Some people interpreted that as a sign she entered a vehicle. If that happened, several possibilities exist. She may have accepted help from a well-meaning stranger. Something could have happened later. Or she could have unknowingly entered a vehicle with someone dangerous. The challenge is that there is no confirmed witness who saw Maura get into a vehicle. No driver has ever come forward and been verified. No physical evidence has linked a specific person to such a scenario. Still, many investigators consider it a possibility because of how quickly she disappeared. Then there is the theory that she entered the woods. At first glance, some people find this explanation convincing. She may have wanted to avoid speaking with police. If she had been drinking, or if she feared getting into trouble after another car accident, she may have decided to leave the road temporarily and wait for police to leave. That kind of decision would not be unheard of. People involved in minor accidents sometimes panic and make choices they would not normally make. If Maura entered the woods in freezing temperatures, conditions could have become dangerous very quickly. The area around the crash site contains dense woodland in some locations. Snow, darkness, uneven ground, and cold weather could make navigation difficult. However, supporters of other theories point to the extensive searches conducted afterward. Search teams covered large areas. Dogs were used. Volunteers spent countless hours looking for evidence. No confirmed trace of Maura was found. For some people, that weakens the wilderness theory. For others, it does not eliminate it. History contains many examples of missing persons remaining undiscovered despite major search efforts. The disagreement continues today. Another area of discussion involves the condition of Maura's vehicle. Investigators found alcohol inside the car. There were indications that at least some alcohol may have spilled during the crash. This led some observers to wonder whether Maura had been drinking while driving. Others cautioned that the available evidence does not allow definitive conclusions about her condition at the time of the accident. What is clear is that she may have had reasons to avoid interacting with police that evening. Whether those reasons influenced her decisions after the crash remains unknown. As the investigation continued, attention also turned toward people in the surrounding area. Whenever someone disappears under mysterious circumstances, investigators naturally examine whether another person could have been involved. Over the years, various individuals became subjects of public speculation. Some lived near the crash site. Some were mentioned in tips. Others attracted attention because of statements they made later. Law enforcement has followed numerous leads throughout the years. Yet despite extensive examination of many possibilities, no one has ever been charged in connection with Maura's disappearance. No publicly identified suspect has been supported by enough evidence to solve the case. This absence of a suspect has contributed to the mystery. In many criminal investigations, evidence gradually narrows the list of possibilities. In Maura's case, the lack of evidence often has the opposite effect. It leaves multiple explanations open. Another reason the case remains so difficult is that some of the information available comes from memories collected after the fact. Human memory is not perfect. People may remember details differently. Small differences in timing can become important. A witness might believe something happened at one moment, while another witness recalls it happening a few minutes later. These differences do not necessarily mean anyone is being dishonest. They are common in investigations. But in a case where every minute matters, even small uncertainties can have a major impact. Years later, investigators continued receiving tips. Some tips led nowhere. Others required additional examination. There were reports of possible sightings. There were reports of suspicious individuals. There were reports connected to specific locations. Many were investigated. None provided a confirmed answer. One thing that has remained consistent throughout the case is the determination of Maura's family. Her father repeatedly stated that he wanted answers, regardless of where those answers led. He participated in interviews, organized searches, and worked to keep public attention on the case. For family members, the hardest part was not knowing. A confirmed outcome, even a painful one, provides some form of certainty. Uncertainty can last forever. And uncertainty is what has defined this case from the beginning. Today, more than 2 decades after Maura disappeared, investigators still cannot say with confidence what happened after she left her crashed Saturn on Route 112. Did she leave the scene voluntarily? Did she become lost in the wilderness? Did she encounter someone who intended to help? Did she encounter someone who meant her harm? The evidence does not provide a definitive answer. Instead, it leaves investigators with a narrow window of time and a series of possibilities. A young woman was seen alive after a crash. Minutes later, she was gone. No verified sighting has ever been confirmed after that night. No body has ever been found. No explanation has ever fully accounted for every known fact. And that is why the disappearance of Maura Murray continues to stand apart from so many other missing person cases. Not because there are no theories. There are many. Not because there are no investigators. There have been countless people working on the case. Not because there is no evidence. There is evidence. But because none of it has been enough to close the gap between the last confirmed sighting and whatever happened next, somewhere within those missing minutes lies the answer. Whether that answer will ever be discovered remains unknown. For now, the road in Haverhill looks much the same as it did on that winter evening in February 2004. Cars still pass through. The curve in the road is still there. The snow still falls during winter. And the question that has remained unanswered for more than 20 years is still the same. What happened to Maura Murray after the crash? No one has been able to answer it. Not yet. Up next are 2 more real cases waiting for you. If this investigation captured your attention, tap 1 and keep watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for future documentaries. And before you go, tell me your city in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where viewers are watching from.